Caffeine-containing foods. Soda is a big one. Even a little sip here and there for your toddler is going to give them a dose of caffeine, which is a stimulant. Do you ever wonder if there are foods you should avoid feeding your toddler? There are. Yes, there are foods your toddler should not eat. And while I have already reviewed the foods that your toddler should be eating, in this video, I am going to talk about 7 types of foods that toddlers should not eat. That's because they're dangerous for your toddler. Choking, food poisoning, and just developing unhealthy food preferences are what's at stake. But all of these things are preventable as long as you have the information you need to make good food choices for your toddler. I'm also going to give you some tips and guidelines for feeding your toddler along the way, so especially make sure you stay to the end because the 7th type of food may surprise you. Let's get started. So first, let's talk about why you have to be careful with toddler food choices. There are 3 main things: choking, food poisoning, and unhealthy food preferences. Choking is the leading cause of injury and early death in children under 4. The good news, it's totally preventable. Exposure to bacteria from food can cause diarrhea and dehydration. And again, if you have the right knowledge, this is totally preventable. And last, certain foods are just not great for your toddler's health. So we know that when toddlers are exposed to different foods, they can develop preferences for them that can change their eating habits and can influence their nutritional and overall health. The best news about all of this is that choking, food poisoning, and unhealthy health is completely preventable with good nutrition knowledge, and that's what we're going to get to. I'm going to review the 7 different types of foods that your toddler should not be eating. But before we get there, if you're worried that your toddler might be eating foods you shouldn't be, and you can relate to this, drop a like, a comment, or follow me below. Okay, let's go for it. 7 types of foods your toddler should not be eating. Number 1, sugary foods and drinks. So you know that before the age of 2, the recommendations are no added sugar for children under the age of 2 in their diets. Why is that? They have tiny tummies and they just don't have a lot of extra room for added sugar. So what's added sugar? It's the sugar we add to food to make it taste sweeter. So when you think about making cookies, you actually add cups of sugar. That's what we're talking about. But for children, for your toddler especially, foods like candy, soda, even granola bars and sugary cereals and sugary yogurts have added sugar. So the goal for toddlers is to really be careful about added sugar in their foods, or offering them things like candy, cookies, and other desserts that are high in sugar because they crowd out the essential nutrients your toddler needs to grow and develop well. If your toddler drinks 100% juice, the recommendation is up to 4 ounces or half a cup maximum per day. The second food your toddler should avoid eating are salty foods. So we have obvious salty foods or salt that we add to our foods. We don't want to do that with toddlers. So things like table salt, soy sauce, these are extra foods that have high amounts of sodium in them, and we don't want to put those onto our toddlers' foods or add them into their foods. Other salty foods can be canned vegetables, or soups, canned soups. But with vegetables, the thing is you can get rid of a lot of the sodium simply by rinsing the canned vegetables or beans under water. It will cut the sodium by 40%. Thirdly, processed meats, things like lunch meat or hot dogs or salamis. Salty meats have a lot of sodium and extra salt in them, so they are another food your toddler should not eat. Third, hard, round foods. So hard or round foods can be a choking hazard for toddlers, and that is why your toddler should not be eating them until they are very proficient at chewing and swallowing and managing food inside their mouths. So raw vegetables or fruits like carrots or corn or apples, these can be choking hazards for toddlers. Grapes, cherries or berries or cherry tomatoes that aren't cut, those small, round, hard pieces of vegetables or fruit can be a choking hazard. Whole nuts can be a choking hazard, so things like peanuts or cashews. What you can do is chop them up a little bit finer and they're much more manageable. Things like string cheese. These are very popular with toddlers, but they can be a choking hazard. So peel the strings. Use them like they're marketed. They're marketed as string cheese, so tear them into strings so you reduce the risk of choking. That goes for large chunks of cheese also, and then also chips like tortilla chips, corn chips. These are choking hazards for toddlers. So is popcorn. So be very careful. Really, toddlers should avoid eating these hard, round foods that can be a choking hazard. Fourth type of food toddlers should avoid eating: squishy foods. So things like gum or marshmallows. These squishy foods can be really hard for your toddler to manage in their mouth without choking. The other thing are spoonfuls of nut butter. So like a spoonful of peanut butter, that's a choking hazard for a toddler. So we want to avoid that. Number 5, caffeine-containing foods. Soda is a big one. Even a little sip here and there for your toddler is going to give them a dose of caffeine, which is a stimulant. And most toddlers I know do not need additional stimulation. They're pretty active. This goes for coffee-containing drinks as well. So those lattes you might be picking up at your local coffee shop and letting your toddler have a sip of that. Again, you're infusing a level of caffeine into their little bodies. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that young children get no caffeine. So watch out for caffeine-containing foods. If you want to learn more about caffeine, I do have a video. You can go check it out. It's all about how much caffeine kids can have and what foods have caffeine, and it's a deep dive into caffeine for children. The 6th type of food that toddlers should avoid eating are fish with mercury. So mercury interferes with brain development. So we want to be careful about the types of fish that are high in mercury when offering these foods to toddlers. Of course, we want toddlers to eat fish because they're an important source of DHA and EPA, both omega-3 fatty acids that help with brain development, but certain types of fish have higher levels of mercury. So things like king mackerel, tilefish, swordfish, and orange roughy. These are all fish that are high in mercury, and we want you to avoid feeding those to your toddler. Now, what type of fish can your toddler eat? Things like canned light tuna are okay. Salmon and shrimp, codfish. These are all good types of fish that are going to offer those important nutrients to your toddler, but not offer high levels of mercury. And the 7th or very last type of food you should not be offering to your toddler are raw foods. So things like raw milk, raw yogurts, raw cheeses. These have been unpasteurized, meaning that the bacteria in them may be at a level that can cause food poisoning in your child. And sometimes the bacteria level is so high that it can be very devastating to a young child. So it is not recommended that young children drink unpasteurized milk or raw milk or any other food that might have live bacteria. So think about sushi, raw fish. That's not good for young toddlers. They don't have the immune system fully developed yet to be able to battle the bacteria that might be transmitted to them through these foods. So, if you want to learn more about feeding your toddler and feeding them well, make sure you drop down into my description of this video and you will find a free download called How to Nourish a Child. It's a big cheat sheet with check boxes to keep you on track. That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out my other videos here on YouTube. See you later.